We're back for the afternoon session of the 2009 deliberative meeting, and I will recognize Mr. Buck.
Mr. Moderator, I would like move to restrict reconsideration on Article 14.
Second. Mr. Buck has moved to restrict reconsideration of Article 14. Mr. Workman has seconded. All in favor, raise your voter cards. Down cards. All opposed, raise your cards. I declare Article 14 has been restricted from further reconsideration during this meeting. Two housekeeping points before we jump to Article 15. During the break, someone has lost a watch, so I will have it here if that watch belongs to you. And the second housekeeping matter, and I thank the folks out in the hallway for providing food for lunch for the benefit of the Winnicott Girls High School basketball team. That will be available throughout the day, so please avail yourself of that. And we do appreciate them staying beyond the lunch hour to provide that to us. On to Article 15. Shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $177,000 representing the balance remaining to be appropriated from the special revenue fund created by Article 41 of the 1996 town meeting for the purpose of town-owned infrastructure within the Hampton Village district boundaries, but rescinded by Article 45 of the March 13, 2007 town meeting for the purpose of installing new decorative lighting at Hampton Beach on the lettered streets, beginning at A Street, including all engineering, design, procurement, shipping, delivery, and installation costs, together with all related appurtenances and activities necessary or desirable to complete the purpose of this article. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. This infrastructure item has been duly determined by the Precinct Commissioners, Public Works Director, and the Town Manager on October 16, 2008. This will be town-owned infrastructure. Adoption of this article will have no effect on the town's tax rate. Do I have a motion to open discussion on Article 15? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Bateman. Mr. Griffin, do you wish to speak to this article?
Well, I would just like to say that this money is already there, and the people have been making plans down at the precinct to make it look a lot better than it looks today, and everyone's worked really hard, so I'd like to see this. I'm in favor of this happening.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 15? Mr. Moody?
When we had passed a $12 million bond issue, largest the town ever did, several years ago for beach infrastructure, we had no plans to put accent lights on sidewalks. This is a village district want or need or whatever they want to call it. And I understand that some of the new concrete sidewalks will have to be torn up, parts thereof, to wire these lights. I think it's a waste of money. We should really help the infrastructure that this has to go to by using it to pay off the infrastructure bond or the police station bond, infrastructure in the village district area owned by the town. Now, I question this meeting that happened on October 16, 2008. The original article a dozen years ago by petition, and most of the years since by petition, not by any committee that was set up in that original vote in '96. It's generally always been by petition, disregarding the fact that there was a 5-member committee set up by town meeting by that vote. And in fact, I questioned it when Mr. Barrington was town manager, and he says, we had no meeting, but here's $200,000 we're going to spend. Well, That meeting on October 16, 2008, with 3 precinct commissioners, public works director, and town manager, was posted as a beach precinct committee meeting. And it wasn't. It was a town meeting, 2 different jurisdictions, 2 different body politic. Village, Hampton Beach Village District, the town has no control over. It's a separate entity, and the town of Hampton is separate. And that was a town committee that was not posted as a town committee meeting. And therefore, they had no jurisdiction to say anything as far as this article is concerned, or this money is concerned. They lack jurisdiction. I tried to get some minutes of that meeting, and they don't exist. 3 precinct commissioners are sworn as precinct commissioners, not as town officers of that committee. They were not sworn in as town officers. So this article is replete with illegalities, and it should be defeated again. Save that money for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 15? Seeing none, Article 15 will appear on the warrant, or excuse me, on the ballot as printed. Article 16, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $38,650 generated from the sale of town-owned cemetery lots to the Cemetery Burial Trust Fund. The interest from this fund is withdrawn annually and deposited in the town's general fund as an offset to the amount appropriated in the operating budget for the maintenance of cemeteries. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Adoption of this article of no effect on the town's tax rate. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 16.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Bateman. Ms. Woolsey or Mr. Bateman, would either care to speak to the article?
Basically, as you can read, this is a housekeeping issue, annual event, nothing new to the board, nothing new to the citizens.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 16? Seeing none, Article 16 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 17, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 from revenues generated from the Hampton Cable TV Origination Fund, a special revenue fund created by Article 21 of the 2000 town meeting and funded by revenues generated from the Cable TV Local Organization Franchise Agreement Fund to upgrade, expand, and enhance the development of the local origination channels. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Adoption of this article will have no effect on the town's tax rate. Is there anyone who would like to move Article 17? Moved by Mr. Bateman, seconded by Mr. Nichols. Mr. Bateman, would you care to speak to Article 17?
Again, this is pretty much a housekeeping item, but this is also an item that is to benefit all of the citizens that are viewing any of the government business that is put on Channel 22, as well as the information for the entire town. One of the best things we have going.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Anyone else on Article 17? Mr. Capolan.
Article Allen, 21 Mill Lane. This is neither to support or reject. I think I see a slew of these articles that are coming up, moderator, that says adoption will have no effect on the tax rate. What happens if there is no adoption? In other words, if the article is defeated, what happens to the fund that's cited here, and how will that be revolved into either the operating budget or set aside as a separate entity? I think we need to clarify in each of these cases that if the voters so chose to reject it, what happens to the in this case, for example, $100,000? Where does it go?
Yes, sir. Is there anyone on the board who can
The funding
answer?
arrives through the Hampton Cable TV Origination Fund. The money is there already. It is a portion that is generated through the cable agreement. If the funds are not withdrawn, they will remain within the fund. But if they are not withdrawn, there will not be financial support to fund the upgrade to expand into and enhance local origination things that are in front of you. If you had seen recently, members of the board from the Cable Committee came before us indicating the need for some of the new digital cameras. We are still operating with a number of the monitors that actually date back 20 years. That is also part of the upgrade, et cetera. So it's a housekeeping item where they come back to ask to take the money out and spend the money on the upgrade for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Mr. Schweitzer, would you like to be recognized on this topic?
If I could, sir.
Yes, sir.
I believe that the wording is to raise and appropriate, and according to the DRA, if we do not use that language, then we literally cannot spend any money on this. The money would go into the fund. It would be received and put in there. But it's my understanding you would not be able to spend it on having anyone sit here and broadcast. So you basically would shut Channel 22 down, to the best of my knowledge, since you cannot spend any money out of that fund. It would accumulate, and then you'd have to appropriate it, raise and appropriate it again next year, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Mr. Workman.
And then I'll have Mike correct me if I'm mistaken, but funds such as this one are set up such that the funds go to a particular purpose. They do not, unless a vote of no does not mean that this money will spill over into the general fund. There would need to be a special article that put forth on a warrant at a future time that would say, close that fund essentially, and then move that money to the general fund, right?
That's correct. We have 3 revolving funds. This is one, rec, and police, and actually the ambulance. And the monies are specifically to go in to be used, in this case, for the cable TV, to buy machinery, equipment, and to run it. The money will stay there. It can't be used by anything else. It is not in the general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Ms. Kaiser.
Ann Kaiser, 7 Palmer Street. Just a clarification. I think in years past, when monies did not have to be raised, they were already there. The terminology raise and appropriate was not in there. It was just appropriate. And I just don't want people at home to get confused. The minute they see the word raise, they think their tax rate is going to increase. That isn't the case. The wording had to be changed this year, I believe, maybe last year, to have that both words in there, raise and appropriate. So look carefully at what effect this will have on your tax rate, and in these cases, it has no effect.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Anyone else on Article 17? Seeing none, Article 17 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 18, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $72,000 for the purpose of building new basketball courts at Tuck Field, as determined by the Board of Selectmen, Town Manager, and Director of Public Works, and to fund said appropriation by transferring $72,000 from the Recreation Infrastructure Special Revenue Fund established under Article 44 of the 2007 Annual Town Meeting. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Recommended by the Budget Committee. Adoption of this article of no effect on the town's tax rate. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 16?
So moved.
Mr. Griffin? Moved. Seconded by Mr. Lally. Would Mr. Griffin like to speak to the article?
I would just like to say that this is similar, only the fund is a recreation fund, and the money's there, and this is something that needs to be done.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Thank you. I'm Diana Martin. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And as you know, I was here at this time last year asking for support to rebuild the tennis courts and the basketball courts. And that was the plan. Unfortunately, because of the rising costs, we were only able to finish one piece of that project. So we opted to finish the tennis courts first. So today I'm here to ask the voters for their support in rebuilding the basketball courts using the same special revenue fund that we used to rebuild the tennis courts. The rebuilding of these courts will enhance the Tuckfield area immeasurably. By rebuilding the tennis courts, the townspeople will be able to participate in tennis, flag football, soccer, frisbee, tackle football, baseball, softball, and basketball, as well as play at the playground. So it'll be a very well-rounded place. And the good news is that by using the special revenue fund to rebuild the basketball courts, we will not have any impact on the tax rate. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Yes, sir.
Hi, Glenn Farrell, Witten Avenue. I just have a general question about revenue funds or special revenue funds. Do they bear interest? Can they bear interest? Are they not allowed to bear interest?
Is there someone on the board or Mr. Swocher who can answer Mr. Farrell's question?
The only
Could you
particular reason I
repeat the
asked.
question? I couldn't hear.
He's
Sure.
inquired whether, and he can correct me if I've misstated it, whether these special revenue funds bear interest, and if so, to how that interest can be used. Is that correct?
Yes, basically I know that the ambulance fund is usually used to purchase, money saved to purchase a new ambulance, and sometimes the balance is $300,000, $400,000 in that fund, and it would be nice to collect interest. I just wondered if it was a state regulation that prevents us.
I honestly can't answer that 100% for sure. I suspect that that is part of what is managed by the trustees. What always gets discussed is the real estate trust fund, which is whatever, $14, $15 million, but there are a number of funds that they also manage, all of which are in like CDs and fixed rate investment vehicles. I believe it's part of that, but unfortunately I don't have the sheet in front of me to verify behind it.
Mr. Schwartzer?
If I could answer that, there's specific funds that are under the trustee of the trust funds. These are not. These are part of the general fund. And they don't accumulate interest per se because they literally are a piece of the large pool. Right? We do account for them differently. They're set aside. They're not part of the budget. They're not part of the general fund that we are talking about when we talk about the budget. The town does accumulate interest on monies, and that part is brought back as interest to reduce, in essence, the expenses, but not specifically for these.
Thank you.
Anyone? Excuse me. Anyone further on Article 18? Seeing none, Article 18 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 19, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $90,000 from revenues generated from the police forfeiture fund, a special revenue fund created by Article 55 of the 2003 town meeting to carry out all lawful functions allowed under federal, state, and local criminal justice forfeiture programs, majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Adoption of this article will have no effect on the town's tax rate. There's a motion to open discussion on Article 19.
So
moved by Mr. Workman.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Workman, do you care to speak to Article 19?
Just in line with the other earlier articles, this is money that is raised through police activities, and it's reallocated back out to help offset those costs.
Thank you. Anyone else on Article 19? Seeing none, Article 19 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 20, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $300,000 for the purpose of making road improvements and authorize the withdrawal of $300,000 from the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund created under Article 16 of the 1998 annual town meeting created for this purpose, and no amount to be raised from taxation on Toby Street, Gray Avenue, Carlson Road, Sanborn Road, Dearborn Avenue, Acorn Street, Smith Avenue, Dumas Avenue, Cliff Avenue, Sunsurf Avenue, Trafford Road, and Hurd Road to include street repairs, reconstruction, and associated materials and labor necessary to do the work, and also to include associated drainage systems, maintenance, upgrades, and improvements, and to name the selectmen as agents for such fund in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Adoption of this article will have no impact on the town's tax rate. Is there a motion to move Article 20 to the floor for discussion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bateman. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Bateman, do you care to speak to Article 20?
Again, for the citizenry, this is a housekeeping item. You can see the highlighted areas that are in need of repair. The funds will be withdrawn from the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, and there is no impact on the town tax rate. It's another housekeeping.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Mr. Warburton.
Mr. Moderator, before I comment on this article, can I make a motion to restrict reconsideration on Articles 15 to 19?
You may.
Second.
It's seconded by Mr. Workman. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration of Articles 15 to 19, cards up. Down cards. Any opposed? Articles 15 through 19 are restricted.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I respectfully disagree with my friend, Mr. Bateman. This really is not a housekeeping measure. We've had some contentious discussion with this article, and I'm going to ask the question again. If anybody would go back to the last 10 town reports, at least 9 out of 10, are we only asking to withdraw $300,000 from Article 20, for the purpose of reconstructing these roads, or are we in fact asking the voters for an additional $300,000 as well to raise? Can I ask Town Manager Welch that question?
Is there anyone on the board or in the town manager's office who can respond to Mr. Warburton's inquiry?
Mr. Moderator, I can advise the hall through the chair that we did in fact run this verbiage by the Department of Revenue Administration, and the Department of Revenue Administration has indicated that we must use the words raise and appropriate, and that by qualifying the raising to say that it's funded by authorization for withdrawal of $300,000, that there will be no impact on the tax rate, and it's automatically restricted in accordance with their directive that the money must come from the Capital Reserve Fund and no other place.
Thank you, Mr. Welch.
Can I, I'm not so sure I got an answer to the question. So, Mr. Welch, are we indeed just withdrawing $300,000 for the people at home? We're not raising $300,000 and then withdrawing?
That is correct.
So if people are voting yes on Article 20, we're voting to take $300,000 from the existing fund, and that's it.
That is correct.
I would request that through the local reporters and certainly the Board of Selectmen over the next several weeks, for those people who don't watch these meetings regularly or are going to go in the voting booth, I have to tell you, this is as confusing as some of the other articles on here. As you well know, in 1998, when I sat on the Board of Selectmen, we were very much in favor, and I know people like Warren Bambury and others remember. We started this fund for the purposes at that time of paying for Route 1 repairs. And over the years, we put money into that fund, and I will go back to the town report of 2000 that had two separate warrant articles. One was to raise and appropriate, Mr. Pluff knows, $350,000. The second one was to take out what was already in the fund. And I'm just saying that logically, to me, it made sense of what we did. And I read the DRA's reply, Fred, and I didn't get the same answer. I almost got the impression that they, yes, agreed that there would be some confusion. So for those watching the meeting, we're only taking $300,000 out of this article so that people don't know we're asking for more. And I appreciate the fact that we have to go in legal language, but I still don't know where this area came from, but I wanted to just clarify for the voters at home and those watching the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warburton. Ms. Woolsey.
Mr. Moderator, I move to amend to strike the last phrase, starting with "and to name the selectmen as agents for such fund in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35. The DRA, when I inquired, let's see, the Budget Committee found the initial article very confusing.
Can I just jump in, Ms. Woolsey, and
Yes.
just get the second on that? Is there a second on that,
Yeah.
Mr. Pierce? All right, so we've got a motion made by
Right.
Ms. Woolsey to strike the language "and to name the selectmen as agents for such fund in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35. Is that
Right.
correct, Ms. Woolsey?
Yes,
Seconded
sir.
by Mr. Pierce.
Yeah, the Budget Committee with the initial submission found the entire article very confusing. I sent an inquiry to Mr. Welch, who passed the inquiry on to Mr. Schweitzer, who passed it on to DRA, who came back to us and said, basically suggested alternate wording of the article, and they did confirm that raise and appropriate is proper to use here. But she also, Jean Sams of DRA also mentioned at the same time that if the selectmen wanted to be named as agents, it should be put in a special article. It has not been done so, and I contend that it's not necessary to have the selectmen as agents of this fund. The Public Works Director, who does need the money to do the roads, is not going to be farming out and doing the roads until spring. And there's more than enough time for the voters to make a decision on this fund when they go to vote in March. So I think this is not necessarily another area in which we need to involve the Board of Selectmen, and I would recommend that we pass the amendment to strike.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Is there anyone who wants to speak to the Woolsey amendment, which is just the language at the end of Article 20? So it's striking that. Does anyone want to speak to that, or are we ready to have a vote on that? Seeing no one who wishes to speak on the Woolsey amendment, we will have a vote on the Woolsey amendment. A yes vote is to strike the language, as you can see on the screen. A no vote is to retain the language. So all those in favor of the Woolsey amendment, which would strike the language in red, raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed to the Woolsey amendment, raise your card. I declare the amendment has passed. So we now have Article 20 as amended. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to Article 20 as amended? Mr. Moody.
How much is in this capital reserve fund? What's the balance? We haven't had an audit for quite a while, a year or so.
Mr. Moody has asked, what is the balance of this capital reserve, road improvement capital reserve fund? Is there anyone on the board or Mr. Schweitzer who could provide information in response to Mr. Moody's question?
I believe Mr. Schweitzer is looking that figure up now, Mr. Moderator.
It's
My recollection, sir, is that it's more than $300,000 with the interest
well,
and
it was
principal.
350 a year ago, so I imagine unless they put it in the stock market, it's still there. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Okay, I just wanted to mention some of these roads have been on for several years, especially the four in the Carlson Road area, but they don't seem to get done by the money we appropriate, and we raise and appropriate when we put it in the fund. Supposedly, we're supposed to be appropriating only when we take it out, but DRA, who knows? I'd like to mention a couple of roads that were on these articles that passed in 04, 05, and 06, $350,000 each year. And the roads were Windmill Lane and Moulton Road. And they're not on here anymore, and they haven't been done. So what kind of a system do we have anyway? Moulton Road is quite bad.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Mr. Schweitzer, are you looking for that, or do you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. While Mr. Schweitzer is looking for that, and we'll give him a little bit of time to answer Mr. Moody's question, to the extent you are here for the first time in the afternoon session, we will be voting on March 10th at Winnicott in the gymnasium from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we look forward to making a more comfortable and more accessible voting area. While we're in our information search, Mrs. Searle has asked me to provide some further information about where that polling place is. If you come in on the Park Avenue end of the Winnicott campus, you have several parking options that will be available to you. You can go down Landing Road and park to the rear of the gymnasium, and we'll have signage as to the entry to the building. Or you can park out on what I'll call the SAU side of the gymnasium. So those parking areas will be available to you on March 10th. Students will not be in attendance on March 10th. Staff will be in attendance. I understand the staff will be parking toward the Winnicott Road side of the facility. So hopefully there'll be ample parking and an accessible site. We all, on the election side of things, recognize the challenges that the Marston School has presented as we grow as a community. So we're hopeful that this will provide a better site for voting, and we're grateful to the Winnicott Cooperative School District for making it available to the citizens of the town of Hampton to use it as their polling place. And there has been no commitment beyond March 10th, so we'll all get a sense of how it works for each side. But that's where we'll be March 10th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I wish I could be more specific on Mrs. Searle's question, but we're laying that area out, but we will have it duly signed, and we'll have the personnel to direct traffic and pedestrian traffic into the polling area.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
According to the statement of the trustees of trust funds through December 31st, 2007, I don't have the draft of the new town report here. The principal on hand, which has not been expended from, was $194,101.74, and the accumulated interest to date at that time was $147,044.72. It was accruing $16,245.34 worth of interest per year. Without including the new accrual, that's about $341,000.
And that was at the end of 2007.
That's correct, sir.
And do we know from history whether we took any money out of that account last year?
We have not taken any funds from that account last year.
Mr. Moody, I know Mr. Schweitzer is still diligently looking for that. Would you accept that as our best response at the moment and allow us to move on to the next article? Thank you, sir. Is there any further discussion on Article 20? Yes. If you would, sir, please, at the podium.
I think to follow up on Mr. Moody's questionnaire, topics of this nature where there are certain specific amounts set aside by warrant article, where do we find out how the performance of that warrant article was achieved in that particular year? Say, for example, there's $300,000 and it lists number of roads and so forth. Where do we find at the end of the year that it took $300,000 and all those roads that are listed there are all done? And how do we gauge the performance of each of these articles that you have that has a specific dollar amount? And it may be housekeeping, but how do we know what is spent and what is spent, what is not spent, and what work is done and what work is not done?
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask the town manager, with respect to Article 20, if this article were to pass on March 10, 2009, and we were to look at the issue on March 10 of 2010, how would the gentleman know whether the streets were done and at what cost?
Mr. Moderator, that if this article were authorized at this town meeting, we would instruct the Public Works Department to issue the necessary public bids to accomplish the work that is necessary on the individual streets. We would take those bids and award them in accordance with a low bid policy of the town. We would then proceed to construct. If there was sufficient funds to finish them all, that would be reported in the Public Works Department's annual report. At the end of the year, if there were streets that were not completed, that would also be published in their report. So you'd have an idea of what was done and what wasn't done. If there were any funds left over and we had completed all the projects, that would go back into the individual account, because once you withdraw it, it's got to go back if you don't spend it. So the money would be there and it would be accounted for in the trustees' accounting.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Anything further on?
Yeah, to Arthur's question on the balance in the road improvement capital reserve, the principal is $194,102, interest of $155,413, with a total balance of $349,515. So pretty much what you had indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
That was as of that's as of the end of 2008, based on the trustees.
Before I get to you, Mr. Moody, is there anybody who wants to speak for the first time on Article 20? Seeing none, Mr. Moody?
At the end of '07, that's not much more than what was the end of '07.
Was that what you got off there? Was that '07 or
Because if they had kept them in the over 5% CDs in '07 instead of taking them out in August after Mackeson got on the board.
Well, Mr. Moody, that's a different issue. So we've got the best information, the reported results.
There would have been over 350,000 by the end of '07, but
I think,
put it in New Hampshire.
To be honest with you, I think that question would have to be directed to the trustees.
They put it in the New Hampshire investment deposit pool, which didn't pay as high interest. Took it out of the CDs.
But we have the balance reported for 2008. So if there's anything further on Article 20.
I don't think they made anything in '08.
Seeing none, Article 20 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 21, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $223,000 for for the purpose of constructing a salt storage shed at the Department of Public Works yard, including all engineering, design, procurement, construction, shipping, delivery, and training costs, together with all appurtenances necessary to complete the project. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 7.4 cents per $1,000 of valuation. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 21? Moved by Mr. Lally. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lassard. Mr. Lally, would you like to speak to the
Yes, we've talked about this in years past. Right now, the town is at a weak position as far as inventory, storage. Salt, just like petroleum or anything else, has gone up in price. At this time, the town is buying salt to treat the roads and so forth, one step at a time. We have no storage facility. This is one of those articles that, in the long haul, we'll see a return on this by the fact that we'll be able to have an inventory, and it'll be in best interest of the town, I think, to have this completed.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Buck, do you care to speak to Article 21? Okay. You have people behind you if you...
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be brief. Sandy Buck, Toby Street. I'd like to move no reconsideration of Article 20.
There's already a motion on the floor.
Yeah. Why don't we deal with 21, and I'll get that point. But let's speak to Article 21 if you care to.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lassard.
We've been, my name's Robert Lassard, Hampton, New Hampshire, under Timber Swamp Road. I'm not going to expound on this too much because this is so much common sense to this article that we don't have to yell at you guys or yell at anybody here. We're in this business, so I can speak on something that I understand and I know, and we can possibly pay this off a lot faster than people think. If they buy the salt in the summertime, the salt will weigh approximately 2,400 pounds to the yard. And if you buy this in the winter, especially right now, the other day I went up and bought it just so you understand. We took our truck in and we loaded it. That truck usually comes out of there about a little bit heavy, maybe 61 or 62,000 pounds, with a real chuck-a-luck load on it. I came out with not quite a full load this trip, and I weighed just as much. Instead of paying $70-some odd a ton for it, we landed out figuring it out. It was almost $100 a ton, just the water alone. And one of the big tractor trailers, the 18-wheeler would come out of there with, in a good load, 33 ton. And you come out of there in the winter with it, and you're not legal for the road. I would say this would be one of the fastest paying back, number one, on the money. Number two, you can't put salt everywhere. The runoff is against this, and for years we were supposed to do this. I think this is just a winner all the way, and I don't think we should spend two more minutes on this. This is a win-win situation, and I know that you have a selectman up there. I imagine he's asked when we're going to be paid back for it, and I imagine he's got it all figured out, and I think you'll agree with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Mr. Webb.
Skip Webb, 11 Windmill Lane. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like the general public to realize that there's more than this besides just a win-win circumstance. It is a win-win circumstance. It is a recurring earnings, and anytime you have recurring earnings, I feel the idea should be implemented, because you're going to not only earn for 1 year, you're going to earn for year after year after year. The other item and many of you will remember it, because this has been in front of us for many, many years, and each time I get up and give this story. This is a directive from the EPA. The EPA has the habit of giving us goals that we have to implement. Now, this is an easy goal to implement compared to a lot of others. We have 3 or 4 of them here in town. They sit back and they go and start reviewing all of these items around their district that they have given requirements to have done. You don't know when they're going to come and look at your list of items that they have given to you and say, hey, these are not done. But when they come, and it's a simple one, their fines are large. And I give you an example. When I was involved with government in the town of Hampton, the EPA gave us a directive to remove our incinerator plant. We ignored it. We did the same thing as the voters here have done on these 4 or 5 items. We thought we were getting away with it. We thought we had control. They went through their review, and when they hit our plant, they said, this was easy, it should have been done. You are being fined $1 million a day from tomorrow on. We checked, they have the right to do that, because we should have had that incinerator, that burning plant down, and a solution for processing our garbage. Heed the warning. Don't know when the EPA is coming, but they are coming. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Anyone else care to be heard on Article 21? Mrs. Zanoy.
Jerry Zanoy here, 16 Presidential Circle in Hampton. I love the article. I think it will have a return on investment. But my question is, where did the figure come from? Did we benchmark against local towns? Do we have a design? What is the thing going to look like? What's its capacity? That kind of stuff.
Does the Board of Selectmen or the manager have a answer, or Public Works?
Public Works Director is here, sir.
Okay. While we wait for Mr. Price to come to the podium in response to Mr. Zanoy's question about how the $223,000 figure was arrived at for the structure.
Mr. Moderator, John Price, the Public Works Director here in the town of Hampton. To answer the gentleman's question, these were quotes that we have received. We do not have the funds appropriated at this present time, so we can't go out for bids. These are quotes that we have gone out to other communities and asked how they have come up with their quotes and their bids. And this is the best estimate that we have, and I can live with it. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Zanoy, I'm gonna, if you have any other information, Mr. Price, to impart on that. If not, in order to catch it on TV, I need to have you at the microphone.
Just wondering, Jerry Zanoy here again, what would the capacity be on those quotes for these sheds? How much could we buy? How many yards or whatever it is? Tons.
We're looking at tons of, last year I think we used 1,800 ton. This year we're hoping to come in lower than the 1,800, but we all know what the weather's like. We're talking about between 1,500 and 1,800 ton design of the building, of the structure, not the building.
And where would the location be on this? I presume at the, at the transfer station.
It will be at the Public Works yard where the sand pile is now, next to the Public Works garage, with a cement concrete floor.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Thank you, Mrs. Zanoy. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 21? Seeing none, Article 21 will appear on the ballot as printed. Mr. Buck.
Mr. Moderator, I move to restrict reconsideration on 20 and 21.
Second.
Moved and seconded to restrict reconsideration on Articles 20 and 21. All those in favor, raise your voter cards. Down cards. Any opposed? Seeing none, Articles 20 and 21 are restricted from further reconsideration during this meeting. Article 22, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 to be utilized for the purpose of modifications to the town office building as to water use, appliances, lighting, electrical systems to make the building more energy and water usage efficient. This will be a non-lapsing account per RSA 32:7 Roman 6, and shall not lapse until the work is completed or 2 years after March 10, 2009, whichever occurs first. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 1.2 cents per $1,000 evaluation. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 22?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bateman. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Bateman, would you care to speak to Article 22?
By viewing the list, these are necessary repairs, necessary upgrades. The electrical system has been overlaid several times, and this is going to be a process of getting the building back to a friendlier shape for some of the occupants, and at the same point, hopefully less expensive for certain things we've already been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 22? Mr. Rice.
Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. Here in the town of Hampton, we have a long, long history of trying to save money and losing a tremendous amount of money and wasting a tremendous amount of money in the process. We always seem to take an adequate amount of money, and in the apparent spirit of thrift, we cut it down and say, let's not spend quite as much. We find out a while later that we have to go back and do the things that we cut out of it, and it costs us that much more. And the list of specific examples on that is as long as your arm. And I won't go into every one of them now. I think most of you are familiar with them. There are many of them. In this case, $35,000 is a drop in the bucket. Well, I won't say it's a drop in the bucket, but it's clearly an inadequate amount to do a complete energy audit to the point and make modifications to the point where it will actually save money. You can't go out and find out whether you've got one window, replace one or two windows with a higher thermal rating to prevent heat radiation. There's a lot of glass in that building. You got to do all of them, or it doesn't matter. You know, if you just wanted to change out an electrical box, it'd cost you a couple $1,000s just to put in a new circuit breaker box if that was what was necessary. Any one of these little steps in there, when you're talking about making changes, energy and water usage, effectiveness, and so on and so forth, $35,000 is just clearly not enough to do enough. It would be wasting the $35,000, but it wouldn't be enough to make a serious savings in the long run. If we don't do it now, we're going to be bleeding to death with these little tiny costs that just keep rolling out the door. And I think that we need to put enough money into this. If we're going to do it, let's do it. Otherwise, let's cut the whole thing out and not do anything. Half a loaf is not better than none. We're better either to do the whole thing or nothing. So I would like to offer an amendment to change the amount of $35,000 to $100,000, which was the amount that was originally proposed and considered by the Board of Selectmen for this action.
Mr. Rice has made a motion to amend Article 22 to change the stated amount from $35,000 to $100,000. Is there a second on that motion? Seeing none, the amendment fails. Any further discussion on Article 22? Mr. Gopalan.
Art Gopalan, 20 Windmill Lane. In each of these, energy efficiency and so forth, I encourage the town to make sure that there is a proper payback. and it is within reason. And obviously, I can't define what it is, but I'm hoping that all these items have been scrutinized to the extent that they make sense, and just not enough to wave the flag. We just have to make sure that it pays back. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Anyone else to be heard on Article 22? Seeing none, Article 22 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 23, shall the town of Hampton vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a long-term lease purchase agreement in the total amount of $576,360 payable over a term of 48 months at a rate of $12,008 per month to purchase a rescue pumper truck for the Hampton Fire Department and to raise and appropriate the sum of $144,090 for the first year's payment for this purpose in fiscal 2009. Such authorization shall include all engineering, design, procurement, construction, shipping, delivery, training, together with all related appurtenances and activities necessary or desirable to complete the purpose of this article. This lease agreement contains an escape clause. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. Passage of this article will mean that each succeeding year's payment will be included in that year's operating and default budgets. The first payment will be due upon delivery of the vehicle to the town of Hampton. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact on the first payment is 4.8 cents per $1,000 evaluation. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 23?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Workman. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Workman, do you care to speak to Article 23?
I'll actually defer to the fire chief.
Well, Ms. Woolsey is at the podium. Would you care to speak, or would you wish to defer to Chief Silver?
I will be delighted to defer to the fire chief.
All right. Chief Silver.
Good afternoon. Chris Silver, 8 Reddington Landing, Fire Chief. This warrant article is being proposed as part of our CIP replacement of apparatus. For many years, the town of Hampton has maintained 5 fire department pumping apparatus. Due to some fiscal constraints over the past 8 or 10 years, we reduced that number to 4. 4 is the minimum number required to deliver an appropriate amount of water as required by the Insurance Services Organization. As we look at replacing our pumpers, there are a number of factors that we consider in determining at what point they should be replaced. Age is one of them, mileage, hours of use, physical condition, capital cost, replacement cost, type of use that it has received. There are a few standards that require replacement of apparatus after a certain period of time. In this industry, generally 20 years is the maximum life a piece of apparatus can remain in service. And you could look at varying communities and based on each community's use, either increase or decrease that amount. For us, because of the conditions here, especially in the seacoast, because of the high volume of use, because of the elements that they are exposed to, our life expectancy of a piece of apparatus is a little bit shorter. Now, what we're looking to replace is one of our 2 1988 Emergency 1 fire department pumpers. The one that we're looking to replace presently has over 125,000 miles and over 325,000 hours of use on it. If you were to factor in the elemental considerations here for the beach, 10 years of use as a first due frontline piece of apparatus is usually a good figure, with about 10 years of second due use. About 7 or 8 years ago, we did replace 2 fire department pumpers. Those are our frontline pieces. And at this point, to maintain the minimum required number of pumpers for ISO, we need to replace one of the older Emergency 1 pumpers. We have spent probably 24 months developing a very detailed specification that satisfies what our requirements are for the community, taking into consideration how we can decrease some of our maintenance costs while increasing the longevity of this piece of fire apparatus. For example, a lot of modern fire apparatus has a lot of electronic, a lot of motor-operated type of valves and equipment. We realize that those create longer-term, higher-expense maintenance issues. So we're trying to take a back-to-basic approach and moving more towards some manually operated controls, reducing some of the initial cost of the apparatus. There are a couple of factors that affect the cost, and two of them were some recent changes. One was an EPA change to the emission standards that took place in 2007. That considerably increases the cost of modern fire apparatus. The other is a National Fire Protection Association standard. In how they're constructed, it's essentially the safety standard for construction of fire apparatus in much the same way DOT and motor vehicle standards determine how cars are built. Both of those changes have caused an increase in the overall cost of these pieces of fire apparatus. Using that as a guide, using a very detailed specification, we met with several apparatus manufacturers to give us as detailed and as close a price as possible so that when we come to the voters, we know exactly what we're asking you to buy and we've got an accurate figure for what we're requesting. $576,360 is the cost to purchase as well as the interest being paid over a 48-month lease purchase term. We chose the lease purchase term because we saw it as the most fiscally responsible alternative to an outright purchase requiring a single appropriation within 1 year. It's consistent with the way that we purchased our last large capital purchase, which was our aerial ladder, and we had lease purchased that over a period of 48 months as well. So essentially what we're doing is maintaining what we're trying to replace through the CIP, coming forward with as much information as we can, as much of a detailed request as we can, and then looking at the best way to fund it so that it has the least impact to the community.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Ms. Woolsey?
The Budget Committee is fully supportive of the chief in his effort to upgrade and keep the apparatus in proper working condition. This affects your ISO ratings for your insurance. This also could potentially affect you if your house is on fire and you don't want to lose any property in this town through fire because we don't have the adequate equipment. So we're really fortunate to have this. Spreading it out over 4 years is terrific, and I urge you to vote for it.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Moody?
What about the emergency one that's going to be ended? Is there any trade-in value on that?
Mr. Moody has asked whether any equipment will be retired as a result of this article passing.
Yes, the vehicle that we would be replacing would be disposed either through direct sale outright or through trade-in. Historically, our experience shows that the trade-in value of apparatus such as this is extremely low. It may be to our advantage to try and sell it.
The fact that we're appropriating for 12 months of 2008, when we won't vote on it until the third month, is that should that be reduced a couple of months?
The question is, and I presume you're speaking of 2009, whether the appropriation of $144,000 is an accurate calculation for 9 months or 12 months, Mr. Schweitzer?
Mr. Moody raises a very good question. We took the approach that we would raise and appropriate the first year's monies. Since it would be a lease purchase, we believe that we can carry forward from the 2009 partially into 2010, and I would make an adjustment in the 2010 budget so that you would have the stub the shorter period in 2010 for that year's lease. So it'll be factored out so that you'll have the net effect in probably 2010, where it's not going to be the total impact that you would have this year. You're going to get the whole thing over the total time frame.
Well, if that's the case, since we always seem to have a little bit of inflation, wouldn't appropriating that other 2 months next year, when the money isn't worth as much, be better than raising it this year?
I don't see that there's going to be much difference when you deal with that larger tax base. It's not going to raise the taxes, basically.
Okay, one comment that the two emergency one apparatus pumpers bought in 1988 cost $165,000.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Yes, sir. On Article 22.
Dick Paquin, 11F Street in Hampton. I'm a business owner, and it would be, I think, irresponsible for me as a business owner to keep on adding, taking out loans that I could not afford to pay back. I think it would be irresponsible to the town to keep on adding debt onto our total debt, bond debt that we currently have, because I don't think the townspeople can ill afford it right now, especially in today's economy with the big tax increase that we just incurred, property tax. I would recommend that in long-term planning, when a particular bond or any bond is paid off, that frees up money that we can go out and borrow and buy something else. So I'd like to see the town have a long-term plan, capital plan, whereas we have a plan as what we need in the future, what debt is going to be paid off when, and then when we can incur more debt. So I would suggest we put this off until we retire an existing bond and maintain the level of bond debt that we currently have as a cap, and when one is retired, frees up money to purchase other equipment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paquin. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 23? Seeing none, Article 23 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 20. Ms. Woolsey is
22 and 23.
Consideration of 23, and Mr. Bateman is seconded. All in favor, raise your voter cards. Down cards. Any opposed? Article 23 is restricted. Article 24, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 for the purpose of engaging the professional services of architects, engineers, and building trades professionals to design and prepare complete cost estimates for the construction and furnishing of an addition to the Winnicott Road Fire Station. Recommended, majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. The estimated 2009 tax impact is 1 cent per $1,000 of valuation. Is there a motion to move to open Article 24 for discussion? Moved by Mr. Nichols. Second. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Workman. Mr. Nichols, do you care to speak to Article 24?
Yeah, sure. When this article started out initially, it was between $400,000 and $500,000. It was decided by the Board of Selectmen that the voters probably wouldn't go for that, particularly where we were also proposing over $500,000 for a pumper, and thus the decision to change from a complete detailed design to a conceptual schematic level design with cost estimates leading towards a bonded warrant for the subsequent year, March of 2010. This approach is supported by the fire chief, and I would ask that Chris come up and make any comments that he might feel appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Chief Silver?
This issue has been discussed for many of the most recent years, and I'm aware that a number of different plans had been proposed for fire station replacements with a number of issues. I think plans had been modified or changed a number of times over the past few years. I think there was a little bit of a lack of support from a number of groups that for the first time we truly see all of the major boards in the community supporting. We have supported the Board of Selectmen, the manager of the Budget Committee, as well as Beach Precinct Commission. While my tenure as fire chief has only just begun, I was asked to provide some input as to where I would like to see this go. And a few weeks ago, at a public hearing, I discussed how I thought the process could evolve and what we could actually accomplish with what this warrant article intends to fund, and had actually made some recommendations that we ask for a little bit more funding and we broaden the scope of this. And I was intent on supporting a motion to that fact, but I understand that a motion to change and expand the scope would not be approved?
Correct.
So therefore, this project and the warrant article as it's presently written will likely need to go forward as it is. So what are we intent to do with this available funding? I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I'm a firefighter and the fire chief. So to truly determine what a cost to build a new fire facility would be is going to require some assistance of those professionals. I can identify what space and what needs the department has. I can identify what the needs of the community are for response, but to be able to put that down and truly create a document that we can utilize to cost estimate this project is beyond my capability. So this money provides me some financial support to enlist those resources to go ahead and look at the feasibility of fire station planning, including things like site selection, response time, infrastructure needs. Work through the programming phase, which helps us identify what resources are needed, what can fit, balance sort of the needs and the wants here. And we had also talked about LEED certification, so we want to start incorporating some green principles and perhaps even pursue certification at some level. That's really going to need the expertise of these types of professionals to help us determine how those will fit into this project. And ultimately, where I hope to get with this level of funding is to the schematic design phase, so that we can have some conceptual drawings and floor plans, physical arrangements that we can come up with some reasonably accurate cost estimates, so that in 2010 we can come before the voters with a good plan you'll have had adequate time to see, with a sound estimate of cost, so we can ask for some funding to continue to move forward with the project.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Pierce, on Article 24.
Mike Pierce, 16 Hedman Avenue. I think this is an excellent approach. We've tried come up with ideas where we want to spend some outrageous amount of money, like $500,000 with a concrete plan to give to the voters. Well, if the voters happen to turn that down, guess what? That's $500,000 down the toilet, to put it bluntly. I think this is a real good approach, to have the chief work with the experts, come out with a plan. The next year we can move forward on this. So I would really like for you folks to all really consider this and endorse this and encourage everybody else to vote for it too. I think it's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Renier.
Richard Renier, 29 Highland Ave. You know, it's been recognized for the past couple of years that there has been a need for a fire station facility both at the beach and also to expand the facility uptown. And I was kind of encouraged in hearing some of the discussions about this recently, that we were talking about, yes, we're going to probably go ahead and maybe increase the amount of this monies to include a study to replace the beach facility. And here we are with this article with no mention of anything for the replacement of the facility at the, on Ashworth Ave at the beach. And now we hear, well, okay, we'll come back in 2010 with a conceptual architectural design for the Winnicott Fire Station, and still no mention of anything at the beach. When are we going to see something happen at the beach? Is there anything that we can do, Mr. Moderator, to change this article to include the professional services and so on, to include the facility at the beach? How can this article be changed?
Can't, Mr. Rainier. The purpose of this article, as it's clearly stated, relates to Winnicott Road Fire Station. So you can change the amount that's proposed, but the purpose as stated, as drafted, as presented, and appears in the warrant, and for all those who stayed at home, it has to do with the Winnicott Road Fire Station.
Well, then in my personal opinion, somebody dropped the ball here. That the beach fire station was not included in this article. And I would not be in favor of changing the amount, of increasing it to any amount of money, unless it would possibly include something to do with the station at the beach. But apparently that isn't possible, so I am disappointed with the concept of this article, and that we're right back to square one, nothing being done for replacement of the facility at the beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rainier.
Sharon Raymond, 2 Lamson Lane. I fully support this article, and I just want to make sure that it's clear that this is just the conceptual design that's going to come out of this. You're not going to have a complete set of design plans that is going to give the detail on what types of equipment and energy efficiency will be incorporated. That will come the next phase when there is a design. But because the Winnicott Road station has to be modified before we can do anything with the beach station, I think this is a great first step, and I highly support it.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. Mr. Gopalan.
Thank you, moderator. On this article, it would at least clarify to me what the deliverables are next year when we reassemble here to talk about the next phase. Because I hear that it's going to be conceptual design, and it is restricted to Winnicott Road Fire Station. Does that mean that it would have basic layout of what it's going to be? I think it would be better if we have a little bit of clearer understanding of what the actual deliverables are that would accrue from this Article 24. Thank you.
Chief Silver, would you like to address Mr. Gopalan's question?
Just repeat what he was asking.
He wants to learn whether you can tell the Assembly now exactly what type of product that we can expect to see if this warrant article passes. So while the warrant article talks about preparing complete cost estimates for construction and furnishing of an addition, is that going to be building plans? What is it going to be?
What exactly are your deliverables for this particular activity that's being done?
If you look at managing a major construction project, this is something that I had learned. For example, we tend to understand what we've experienced. You know, I built my own home. I know how much it cost to build my house, and I know how much it cost me to enlist the services of an architect to design the plans for my home. So when we look at a project like this, we think, well, what is $30,000 really going to get us? And I can tell you that when you're looking at a set of documents to design, bid, and build, there is a significant cost. When you're looking at getting to a point where you have identified what your needs are for the station, what the physical arrangements and sizes, and a lot of what we look at when we talk about the size of spaces and the arrangements are heavily driven by codes, not only building codes, but other compliance codes. Where we hope to get with this, and where I expect to get with this, is a set of drawings that identify elevations, floor plans and arrangements, physical arrangements, based on some sizes. And during the schematic phase, we take all of our wants and needs that we've identified for size and space, and it's kind of like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. We begin to move them around. How does the flow work within the building? How does it fit within the space that we may have allotted? How does it now begin to look at cost, and how does it fit with what we think we can afford? And then we begin to whittle down or add or adjust based on all of those factors. So the ultimate goal is to have a product that we can solidly estimate what the cost for construction of the building would be. In that cost of construction of the building would also be the design, bid, and build documents. Those would be the full set of engineering plans for site, for construction of the building, for mechanical services like your heating, your ventilation, your plumbing, your electrical, your fire protection. All of those would be in your design, bid, build documents. We cannot get to that point with the funding we're asking in this warrant article. This just gets us a solid estimate for the build cost.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Mr. Lassard.
I was on the board that built the last fire department, and all I can say is I'm going to give you a little bit of history. I know I'm going to be, a few of you is bad at me, but it took Hampton Beach to do the fire station to get the town uptown to start doing something. And I was very fortunate to be on the board that built that. I know the people that built it. They did a fantastic job for the money. And at that time, we met all the obligations, all the laws. But since then, I bought a little place in Florida, down in one of the oldest cities in Florida, Port Orange, right next to Daytona. In the last 20 years, we've been going down there a month and a half at a time. I watched the town of Hampton say, we're going to do this fire station. We're going to build this fire station. Then I was told by some people at the town of Hampton, where the fire station is uptown, we'd build it there, but the ground's too soft. But they're building down in the swamp at the beach. It's all right. That's solid. So I can only tell you, the last 20 years that I've been going down there, the Florida, Port Orange. Matter of fact, last year I think they opened up either 2 new fire stations or 2 police stations and 1 fire station. They have built a complete town. My taxes hasn't gone up from those buildings because what they did, they planned ahead. We've been planning ahead to fix this. We bought the town, the bank. I should have thought when they realized the bank was sold so cheap, and they took that money and threw maybe another $750,000 up the street. They sold their bank, went up the street, leased a piece of land, and threw another $500,000 to $750,000 in there, and they don't even own the land. That was enough to me to show we should have never bought the last town office. But I don't know too much, so we'll let that go. I watched this town spend millions of dollars last year and the year before with your, I'll bite my tongue for a minute, on the sewer at Hampton Beach. And we haven't finished the sewer, but we got rid of the guys because we were going to save $300 or $400, $300,000 or $400,000 on the side streets. Now it's going to maybe cost us $3 million to do the side streets. But we haven't planned, and I think by giving this plan, we're starting somewhere and we can start doing it. But if we're going to take this money and we're not going to be able to do it, I'll be against it. But give them the money to do the plan with. Let's not throw away no more money foolishly. But I say, let's do the one uptown now, get it done, and then let's go and find a place at the beach. And I sure wouldn't want to have it. It's a nice location. I mean, you can watch everybody walk by. It's beautiful during the day and all that, but we gotta do the uptown one first because we can't use this money nowhere else. But I hope it's enough money to do what we need, and I know Chief Silvers will do will absolutely try to do the best job there is, because I have a lot of faith in them. And I'm for this article only because we're gonna look into it before we jump into it, like we did the last 2 or 3 things in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Mr. Rice.
Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. I was on the Board of Selectmen when we bought the town hall, and we got a $3 million piece of property for about $750,000 with one of the most prominent real estate agents in the town helping us out on it, and he didn't make a penny on it, so I think we did okay on it. If we hadn't punched a hole in the bottom, we would have been okay. With regard to this, I agree 100% with the concerns about whether we're doing uptown or down there. We need to get one of them in place. We need to get one fire station in place. I agree with the purpose of this article, that it wants to get enough information so we can proceed on. But just like I said on a previous article, this isn't enough money to do it, and we're going to be throwing good money after bad. Knowing what it takes for an architect to estimate the cost of designing a home is not at all the same as what it takes to get an architect to estimate the design of a specialty building like a fire station. I know this because in the 80s I was employed by an engineering firm by the name of Henningsen, Durham, and Richardson, and they specialized in what they called justice buildings, police stations, jails, courthouses, and the like. And they said that every one of these engineering disciplines have their own specialties. They have their own unique things that they must put in there. As a result of being a specialty firm, their price goes up a little bit. Now let's take a look at the amount of money we're talking about right here, $30,000. You know right off the bat that you bring somebody in, you're gonna have a couple $1,000s worth of expenses, not the labor, just the expenses. It's gonna be a couple grand. It's gonna be for transportation, it's gonna be for materials, it's gonna be for any tests that they have to do, just out-of-pocket expenses. That you know is gonna be in there. What's left, let's say it's about 28,000 or so. You're gonna be paying an architect or an engineer or a building trade specialist, something on the order of $50 an hour. And they work 40 hours a week. That's going to be $2,000 for one man week. So what you got is 14 guys working for a week, one guy working for 14 weeks or some combination thereof. If you're going to get full, complete drawings, take out of that the draftsman's time. Well, you're going to pay a draftsman $30. Our cost to them is going to be 30, 35, maybe $40 an hour. A draftsman that knows what he's doing, and that's going to cost you. So what you're going to get out of this is maybe, and a draftsman is not going to be able to do a complete floor plan and an evaluation as has been recommended, and do it for only a couple of $1,000. The numbers just don't add up to get the job we want for this amount of money. Now, I'd love to have it done for free. I wish we could get freebies, but when you hire these professionals to come in, they charge you. That's how they earn their living. And you've got to pay what the going rate is, and I don't believe that the going rate will allow you to get what you want to get. I understand what the chief is saying here, but my experience in the engineering field is that you are not going to get that much out of it, and you're going to have a little bit more money than this. So I would like to, I don't like spending more money, but if we either need to spend enough to get the job done, or vote this thing down at town meeting, one or the other, because I don't think we're going to get much that we can put in our pocket and take home for $30,000. I don't think we'll get a complete job. And if we don't, we're going to be stuck right where we are now by saying, gee, we don't have enough information to make a decision to move forward on this and actually build it. So I would like to propose an amendment to raise the $30,000 to $50,000 so that we've at least got a fighting chance to get something that will be something we can work from when we're completed.
Mr. Rice has made an amendment to increase the stated sum from $30,000 to $50,000. Is there a second? Seconded by Vic Lassard. Mr. Rice, would you put that amount in writing, please, so that I can give that to the clerk and the administrative assistant? Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the Rice amendment? Just the amendment, which is increasing from $30,000 to $50,000. So the commentary would be restricted to the increase. Ms. Latimer.
We've already spent $30,000 on plans that have yielded nothing. One of those people who threw higher figures out there. And that was to get a design build so that there would be something physically to present to you. We're in another one of those messes here. We know we need not one facility, we do need two. Mr. Renier is exactly right. The beach needs to be addressed too. And it's a matter of which foot you put in out there, and we keep choosing not to put any out there. This is a selectmen's warrant article, and we would have liked to have changed the wording on it where it says, in addition to the Winnicott Road Fire Station.
Ms. Latimer,
But I
I've
believe-
been asked about that.
I
I'm
was
not going to
going to-
entertain it, so I'd ask you to speak to the $50,000
Mr. Moderator,
amendment, please.
with all due respect, I am saying that. It would have been a choice so that the precinct knows and the beach knows. It would have been a choice at this point in time to have changed that wording, but we were advised that legally we cannot. So we are bound by it being wording of the Uptown Station. So where does that put us? We're in that rut that we know we have to address two entities. We have to start somewhere. $30,000 is woefully inadequate for anybody who's built anything in any way. You can't get anything for that. Are we seriously going forward, or are we going to tank this for yet another year? Be back on the drawing board, be back here with more rhetoric next year? Or do we, and I support Fred's motion, do 50,000. Our fire chief went back out there and spoke to numerous other towns who have recently built a facility and came back and assured us that $50,000 would get us in forward motion here. We need that. We need to stop being divided on this issue and come to terms, because the longer we take to come to terms with one station will be that much longer that we come to terms for the other. I'm sure that with approaching this with some sort of design and getting schematics, we are going to have to consider both entities to come out with a plan that will best suit the design going forward on the building. We have some things that we have down the beach, we have some things that we have uptown. We are going to have to look at those things. I think even if the wording is this way, there'll be consideration there. But we have to dedicate ourselves here in this room to understand what we need. We're way past the wants on this. This isn't a want situation. It's a necessity. You have only but to tour the facilities to understand that. You had no one in disagreement on the budget committee, and no one in disagreement as selectmen as to whether or not we need them. The price tag, yeah, we've all disagreed with what the price tag will be, but we're not going to get close to a real price tag till we have a design in our hand. And until we have that, we don't know what part of a building we're going to cut, what part we're going to go forward with. When we started serious talks about this, it took $30,000 out there a couple of years ago for a pretty watercolor drawing, all right? We weren't even talking about a green building. The past year has forced us into thinking green and knowing, you know what, oil and utilities and all that, after you build a building, you got to maintain it. Some things have come into the mix in just the past 12 months that we need people more qualified than we are to put down and to go forward from there. So in support of Mr. Rice's motion and amendment to change this to $50,000, I am in strong support of it. I wish it was more. Realizing the times that we're in, I realize that we'll be hard-pressed right now to get more. But I very much encourage you to look at this, see where your commitment is, see what we really need, and how we go about getting it, how we put that first foot out there with resolve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Ms. Woolsey, to the Rice Amendment.
I support Mr. Rice's amendment, but we have, I think your chief is under no illusions that he's going to buy a huge amount of services with either $30,000 or $50,000. We discussed at the Budget Committee the figure of $475,000, which was Mr. Welch's general estimate of what it would take to hire an architect. Realistically, at this point in time, I don't think anyone in this town is going to vote for any project with a Board of Selectmen just saying, give us X million dollars and we'll build something. I think everybody is pretty well on board with the fact that we are going to have a plan. We are going to have a plan sooner rather than later. And at this point in time, and with the constraints on the economy, I think, I certainly, and I think the chief, looking forward to using this article as a measure of faith. We're going to be looking to the community to say, how supportive are you? Whether this ends up as 30,000 or 50,000 on the actual printed warrant, we need a commitment at this point in time from this community as to what we're going to do. The beach absolutely is a critical factor. Until we can move the command staff from Hampton Beach uptown, we're not going to be able to actually start construction on the beach. I have promised the residents of the beach and the precinct commissioners that I will fight as hard as I can to make sure that we get an adequate substation down there. We have to do that. But you, in turn, need to put pressure on your selectmen to find a land location for the substation at the beach, folks. And part of the planning is going to require land. We are going to have to determine where that station at the beach is going to go. And delay does nothing to help us. So I support Mr. Rice's amendment with a full understanding that this will not be enough either. This will not buy us anything wonderful. But I have faith in this chief. I trust his judgment. I think he can get us going. And what I'm looking for, I think what we all need to look for right now is a vote of faith and confidence from the public and say, yes, let us start.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Raymond, on the amendment.
Sharon Raymond, 2 Lamson Lane. I'll speak as an engineer right now, and going from $30,000 to $50,000, they can do something for $30,000. I think the chief will be able to get more detail on the conceptual level on both the cost estimate and the siting and the layout. So I highly support $50,000, and you can get a conceptual level design and cost estimate at that point, but you're not going to get detailed plans and specifications. So as long as people understand that this is just to give a concept so that next year there's something for the town to vote on, I think that's...
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. Are we ready to vote on the Rice amendment? A yes vote will be to increase the amount in this warrant article from 30,000 to 50,000. All those in favor of the Rice amendment, increasing from 30 to 50, raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed to the Rice amendment. I declare that the amendment has passed. So the Article 24 as amended now contains the figure of $50,000. Do we need any further discussion on the article as amended? Mr. Zanoy.
Jerry Zanoy here, 16 Presidential Circle. I'd like to get an understanding of what addition means. Are we accommodating equipment or attempting to accommodate equipment on either side, east and west, as you face it? Or are we looking for conference rooms, and other areas, with second floors and space for
Let me
other
get
meetings?
Chief Silver, if I may. The language of the warrant article, Chief, states the furnishing of an addition to the Winnicott Road Fire Station, and Mr. Zanoy has asked for some detail, if you know what that would encompass at this time before undertaking the review.
Part of the process here is determining what our space needs are going to be. Therefore, it's difficult for me to say, yes, it will be a conference room or a meeting room, or how much office space we will in fact specifically need. That's part of our assessment and evaluation, and that's part of what we need those professional services to help us work through. Once we've identified those, then we'll know how much total space we're looking to add to the current Station 2. As much of the existing structure that can be reused, absolutely, we intend to reuse it. But, if you look at the actual physical size, you have your apparatus bay space, which is essentially just garage space, and then you have the office living quarter area, which in fact is about the size of, many average homes. So therefore, the actual office space, if we intend to move our headquarters from the beach to Winnicott Road, ensure that we've got adequate facilities to house the administrative part of the organization, as well as communications, as well as emergency operations, then, you know, that's what we hope to identify through this part of the project.
So is it strictly fire department requirements, or can it expand to other town needs being fulfilled?
My intent based on this is to plan for fire station.
Thank you, Mr. Zanoy. Thank you, Chief Silver. Be ready to move on to Article 25. C.
22 and 24.
Ms. Woolsey, would you agree to expand that? There's a motion on the floor, been seconded by Mr. Workman, to restrict reconsideration of Article 22 and Article 24. All in favor, raise your voter card. Down cards. All opposed. 22 and 24 have been restricted, and we are now at Article 25. Shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $340,000 to be placed in the Department of Public Works Equipment Capital Reserve Fund created under Article 23 of the 2008 Annual Town Meeting in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35, majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department: this warrant article is for the same purpose and in the same amount as requested and approved in 2008. Therefore, passage of this article would have no additional impact on the 2009 tax rate. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 11.2 cents per $1,000 of valuation. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 25? Moved by Mr. Griffin.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bateman. Mr. Griffin, would you like to speak to Article 25?
Excuse me. Well, it speaks for itself. It's something that was voted on last year, and we'd like to make use of it.
All right, is there anyone else who, Mr. Moody, wishes to be heard on Article 25?
Since this was new last year, 340,000, do we have a balance, and what did we buy with it?
Could I get information from Mr. Price? I see him coming to the front of the room, and well, let's start with Mr. Price. Mr. Moody's question is there a balance on this fund, and what were the monies expended on last year?
Mr. Moderator, John Price, Public Works Director for your town of Hampton. There was no money spent this past year because we didn't have the authorization from town meeting to expend these funds.
And the other part of the question was the balance. Is the balance $340,000? Mr. Schwartz?
No, he's efforting it.
The balance in the fund is $318,861.
$318,161.
$861.
861. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to wait. Mr. Price, do you have anything further to add to? Okay. Mr. Pierce.
Mike Pierce, 16 Headman. If you start off with 340 and you end up with 318, that's a little curious to me.
Oh, so I didn't hear, I was getting the number, I didn't hear the discussion.
Didn't we put 340,000 in this
Yes.
last year?
Right.
And if we put in 340,000, if we didn't spend any money, it's now
There was money
318, I'm a
spent.
little confused.
There was money spent.
Excuse me. We didn't buy any of the trucks and equipment for the dumps. There was a purchase of an automobile. I apologize, Mr. Mooney.
Anything further on this Article 25? No, you got to come to the podium, Mr. Gopalan.
Would you, Art Gopalan, 20 Windmill Lane. Would you please expand on what the automobile is about and why that's a priority over some of the aging equipment?
Yes, sir. The automobile was purchased for the use of, instead of buying a pickup truck, it was used because we do send people to Concord, and there are times that we send 4 or 5 people, of which times then we have to send them up in 2 pickup trucks, which is more costly to the town in gasoline and wear and tear on those pickup trucks.
Now, Mr. Pierce, I'm going to have you wait and see if there's anyone who hasn't spoken on this article who would like to speak to Article 25 before I recognize Mr. Pierce for a second time. Seeing none, Mr. Pierce.
I don't personally, I'm Mike Pierce, 16 Hebman Avenue. I don't personally have a problem with buying the vehicle, but I was under the firm impression this was to buy large pieces of equipment in the $500,000 to $1 million range, like bulldozers and trucks and so forth. And for going out and spending it on cars like I would be spending it on sandwiches compared to my purchasing a car, that's a big difference in my mind. I'm a little confused here, but I'm usually confused when it comes to spending money anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Lassard.
Sorry for getting up to speak, but, you know, we've gone a little bit too far in this. You used to have pickup trucks run around this town with 8 miles on the gallon of gas. Now, I've heard somebody say here they're in business. Well, I'm in business, and I sure won't take a 1-ton truck that gets 6 to 7 miles on a gallon of gas and go up the road when they could get a car that gets maybe 28. Is that the one that you guys? All right, replace the pickup truck with a car that gets 28 miles on a gallon. Take that same pickup truck and put a snowplow on it so they got a pickup truck. A public works director, I don't think should be riding around in a $40,000 or $48,000 pickup truck, diesel pickup with big doors and all this fancy stuff on it. I mean, we got to use common sense here today. I mean, here we go again. Like I said, it took Hampton Beach to get the first fire station and get things going. Now we're going right back to go behind that. Anybody, how many people here drive a 1-ton truck around to go to church or anything? Can somebody tell me? I mean, I personally don't have that kind of money to spend on gas. I don't think Mr. Puff will go around with a big pickup truck if he drive a car. I think the town's done right, and you know, we're pulling it apart, and it stinks in plain English. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Anyone else on Article 25? Mr. Gopalan.
I don't really want to belabor this point, and I don't think that we need to get defensive about it. The fact of the matter is there a town policy that allows people to use personal vehicles? Is there a town Oh, wonderful. Can you hear me now? Okay, now I can get on the commercial. Is there a town policy, business policy, that permits town employee to use personal vehicle that will be reimbursed on per mileage basis for transporting people to Concord? I believe that the
Mr.
director said
Gopalan, and what I'm going to interject here is that we got a $340,000 warrant article on DPW equipment capital reserve. And I don't want to take us into policy about something on vehicles. I understand there's a link here. I understand the link, the suggestion, the statement that DPW money out of this fund was used for a vehicle. So I'm going to ask the board to entertain that. But otherwise, I really feel we need to stick close to how do we feel about a $340,000 DPW equipment capital reserve fund. So is there an answer to Mr. Gopalan's question about policy on vehicles?
If I could.
Lally.
I'm not going to quote a policy here. I'm just going to throw this out. We have total trust in our department heads that if they're doing training in Concord or any place else, that they're going to send employees in the most economical way. They're going to do it on duty. They're not going to spend overtime for it. And they're going to do it the most economical way. It seems like common sense to me that if you're going to go to Concord, you'd rather take a car than a truck, but that's just the way it is. I think it's up to the department heads, and to micromanage on something like this, I think is not the way to go. Again, leave that to the department heads, whether it's police, fire, or public works. And when something happens that looks out of line, then the town manager will handle that. But I think when you micromanage to this point, I think from what I just heard, he's sending people for training or whatever to Concord, to a seminar, and he's using a town car. That makes perfect common sense to me.
Mr. Price? I'm sorry, Mr. Welch.
Mr. Moderator, we made a decision last year. We had a $30,000 plus pickup truck to purchase, and that pickup truck was specifically just to be driven by the Public Works Director. That's the only purpose it served. We made a decision to go out to bid to cancel that vehicle, to go out to bid and find a vehicle that cost less than $20,000. And thanks to an individual who lives in town, we were able to acquire a vehicle for $18,000. Certainly good gas mileage, because pickup trucks don't get very good gas mileage. The majority of the money in this account wasn't deposited there until the end of the year, because we didn't want to have to spend existing capital to put money in a capital reserve fund. And the statute says it doesn't have to be paid out until December 31st. As we stand right now, we have $3.5 million worth of equipment to replace in the Department of Public Works, including pickup trucks. You probably all have recognized that we have not plowed all the sidewalks in town. The reason for that is because we burned up a vehicle not long ago, and they've just declared it to be destroyed, and they've given us $8,000 to purchase a new $100,000 vehicle with to clean the sidewalks, because that's what they cost. $100,000 will be coming out of this account to purchase that piece of equipment. We have behind schedule and deferred schedule in excess of $1.5 million worth of equipment to replace. But because the money isn't there, we made a conscious decision last year to put in $340,000 a year to ask the town to do that over the next 10 years. So we're deferring the cost of equipment purchases for a 10-year period. Some of it should be replaced now, but because of our sensitivity to the tax rate, the article before you carries out year 2 of that $340,000 per year program. We'll be purchasing equipment in the next couple of months, a substantial amount of it, because we are deferred. The vehicle that was purchased is there for the Public Works Director to use and for other people to use to go to Concord for classes in public works areas and other areas, and solid waste and the sewer treatment plant and so forth. It's a good buy for us. It's a good buy for you. It saves gas. It was a decision that resulted in more than $10,000 worth of capital outlay savings to the town. So that's what we went for. That's what we did. We got a good price on it, and we'll be purchasing additional equipment out of this account. If the account doesn't pass, then we can purchase $340,000 or slightly less than that, because we purchased $18,000 out of it worth of equipment in the future. That will get us 3 sidewalk tractors if we're really lucky. That's not very much. So we need to continue to fund this account. The purchases that were there, or in fact were cut, and we hope we're managing it correctly. Certainly if we're not, I count on individuals to come to me and say that they have a difference of opinion, and we'll certainly look into it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Anyone else on Article 25? Seeing none, Article 25 will go to the ballot as printed. Article 26. Shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 for the purpose of providing full larviciding of mosquito breeding areas in the town of Hampton, including catch basins, and for spraying of adult mosquitoes during the months of June through September 2009. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. This warrant article is for the same purpose and in the same amount as requested and approved in 2008. Therefore, passage of this article would have no additional impact on the 2009 tax rate. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 1.6 cents per $1,000 of valuation. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 26? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Lally. And before I turn it over to Ms. Kaiser, we have 51 articles on our warrant, and we are at the halfway mark. And I'd I'd like to recognize Ms. Kaiser to take us into the second half.
Ann Kaiser, 7 Palmer Street, also chairman of the Hampton Mosquito Control Commission. I'll just make this very brief. Whoops, sorry, that better? I'll make this very brief. This is just a continuation of what we've been doing for the last 4 years, ever since our budget was cut by the Board of Selectmen due to the first default budget 5 years ago. We need this money in order to fully treat the town. The $60,000, which has been in the budget for the last 5 years, is not enough to even do the larviciding, which is our first line of defense. We need this extra $50,000 in order to complete the job of doing the larviciding and also to do an adequate road spraying to kill the adult mosquitoes. And as you all know, you've been aware of the West Nile virus and the Triple E. That has not abated. Thank God we had no human cases in Hampton this past year. But you never know when it might happen, and I just want to stress we're only a mosquito control commission. We don't eliminate mosquitoes. It's still up to the individuals to take responsibility for themselves, to treat themselves with repellents, to wear long sleeves, take cautions when you're out when the mosquitoes are about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 26? Seeing none, we will move on to Article...
Moderator, just a point of order. In order to, just to go back what you said about time, for Article 27, I'd like to move to waive the reading, as long as everybody can see the article on the screen, if that's okay with everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. All those, is there a second to the
Second.
motion? To waive. All right, we will...
Article 27.
Article 27, I move, I've taken a motion to open discussion on Article 27. By Mr. Nichols. Second? By Mr. Lally. Article 27, Mr. Nichols, would you care to speak to Article 27?
Sure. In the interest of minimizing the number of articles on the ballot, the Board of Selectmen made a decision to combine all the social service warrant articles onto one article, with the provision that those articles contained in Article 27 would be articles approved by the public in 2008 and at the same amount of money. That's pretty much all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Okay, there it is. That's good. Thank you. Get it all up there?
So the social service articles that appeared in individual form as late as 2008 have been combined into a single article, which appears as number 27.
My name is Bill Hartley. I'm here to speak in connection with the Seacoast Visiting Nurse Association, which is the largest item in this article. And I'd like to make a couple of points that in deference to the Board of Selectmen and the towns, we have not asked for an increase in our donation from the town for a few years. And that doesn't mean that our costs haven't gone up. We have to recover the excess costs of the free service we give to Hampton residents through other donations. And so I would hope that people would keep this in mind when they decide to donate to organizations. They would keep the Seacoast Visiting Nurses Association in mind, because we are a nonprofit organization, but we can't lose money. So we have to make it up with other reasons. I'd like to ask permission for the Executive Director of the Seacoast Visiting Nurses Association, Maggie Burke, to speak before the board, even though she's not a resident of Hampton. Is that okay?
Mr. Hartley, is Ms. Berg here?
She's coming down.
All right. What our custom is if the body wishes to hear from a non-resident, we need to have an affirmative vote. All in favor of having Ms. Berg address the body today, raise your voter's card, down cards. All opposed? Ms. Berg, you have the podium. Could you spell your last name just for...
Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak today. I just wanted to give you some idea of the services that Seacoast VNA does provide to Hampton residents. 33% of all the people that we see at Seacoast VNA are Hampton residents, and we do quite a bit of discounted and free care, along with community health clinics, to the tune of about $47,000 per year. So I'm very, very happy and thankful that the town has supported the VNA over the past 10 years at least minimum. And we certainly see an increase in more people needing services. And this is a very important service, along with a lot of the other social service agencies up there, to be able to have people stay in their home, get some preventative care and skilled nursing care so that they stay out of the hospitals and in our communities. So again, I appreciate your support and your continued support of the Seacoast VNA and the majority of all of these agencies, because we all work very closely together to provide a very valuable service to everybody here. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Mr. Nyan?
John Nyan, 4 Penniman Lane. Mr. Moderator, I come to support this this warrant article. I happen to know a number of the social service agencies that the town has agreed to continue to support. So my comments are in favor of this warrant. However, I would like to add an amendment, a motion to add the following statement to this warrant article, and that be, furthermore, these 19 human services agencies be required to give a written report at the end of the given fiscal year to the Board of Selectmen, highlighting what the funds were used for and what impact these funds had in assisting their goals and objectives. I make that as a motion, and I'd like to make a comment after a second, if I get a second.
Seconded by Ms. Bridle. And just so that the body's clear, you wish to add a sentence to the effect that all of these agencies that are listed in Article 27, if Article 27 passes, are required to give a report to the selectmen as to how the funds were used. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Why don't you speak to your amendment, and we'll get that.
Mr. Moderator, I have worked in many years in social services, and I know the cry and the need for services at a local level in terms of seeking funds from a variety of different sources, be it federal, state, or local. However, I think it's critical in today's economy and in today's world that we look at our department heads in our town and to come and speak towards their budgets, and where they are scrutinized by two bodies to look at each line item and to really justify that line item. And in this particular fiscal year, I look at the 15 agencies that we are looking to support as an extension of Hampton Town. And they should also be responsible, as department heads are, to really justify their expenditures and the impact on those expenditures to their goals and objectives, and also to let people know here in the town of Hampton what these funds are going for every year. So that is the purpose of my my amendment, Mr. Moderator, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nyan. Anyone else wish to speak to the Nyan amendment? All right, seeing none, we will get this on the screen, and then we will take a vote on the Nyan amendment. And Mr. Nyan, I'd ask you to scrutinize the language on the screen to make sure it's consistent with your amendment. Christina. Mr. Nyan, my only question is in the first line of the amendment, agencies be required as listed, and there seems to be some redundant language there. Okay, so furthermore, these 19 human service agencies be required to give a written report at the end of the given fiscal year to the Board of Selectmen, highlighting what funds were used for and what the impact these funds had in assisting in their goals and objectives. Is that okay? All those in favor of the Nyan amendment, raise your voter card, please. Down card. All opposed? Nyan amendment has passed. Is there any further discussion on Article 27 as amended? Seeing none, we move to Article 28. By petition of Anita Nimchuk and at least 25 others, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,400 to defray the costs of services provided by TASK, transportation assistance for Seacoast citizens, to eligible Hampton residents in the town's 2009 budget. Majority vote required, not recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. TASK recruits, trains, and mobilizes a core of volunteer drivers who provide rides to seniors and other adult residents whose health prevents them from driving. TASK provides services in 8 Seacoast communities, including Hampton. The amount requested represents 20% of the total funds requested from municipalities, which is in proportion to the percentage of TASK trips provided to Hampton residents. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department: the estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 0.2 cents per $1,000 evaluation. I'll take a motion to open discussion on Article 28. I have a motion. Motion from Mr. Bridle. Do I have a second? Second from Ms. Kaiser. Mr. Banbury, would you like to speak to the article, Article 28?
Well, actually, I'd like to speak to Mr. Moderator for a moment. Nita Nimchuk, the original petitioner, was here earlier.
Yeah, you need to speak into the microphone, and I'll be able to hear you.
Nita Nimchuk, the original petitioner, was here earlier but called away and had to take her daughter to the airport. I would like to ask permission from the moderator to have our coordinator, who does not live in Hampton, speak to the article.
And who is that coordinator? Do you know?
Carol.
Okay. So the question for us again is non-resident town of Hampton. Is the body amenable to, agreeable to having this individual speak to us? I understand she is the executive director of TASK. Is that correct? Right. And I do recall seeing Nita earlier today here at the town meeting. So all in favor, raise your voter card. Down cards. Any opposed? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Carol Gullah, and I'm the coordinator for TASK, Transportation Assistance for Seacoast Citizens. And I do appreciate the opportunity to come before the town and let you just know in a minute or two what it is we're doing. Started off about 2 years ago, mobilizing core volunteer drivers to help give folks rides to where they needed to go. We started off, had 6 drivers, did about 40 rides a month. And I wish I had more firm numbers for you, but as I looked at the last quarter of 2008, the increase was so huge that I feel like I have to go through and double check. But as I said, we started off 2 years ago, 6 drivers, 40 rides a month across 8 towns. In December of 2008, the month of ice storms and general mayhem, we were up to about 40 drivers and had done 271 rides for the month of December. 20% of those are for Hampton residents. What TASK does, it's a little different. You have other agencies that do provide some senior transportation. Every piece is essential. We all know how difficult it is to live in this region. if you don't drive or have access to a vehicle. So many of those agencies that you approved in the last article, if a person can't get there, the agency can't do their job. But we all work together. I work with Seacoast VNA with referrals. We all work together. But the important piece that TASC contributes that others don't is the only thing that restricts us is the availability of a volunteer to go where someone needs to go when they need to go there. TASC volunteers have driven very recently. On a snowy day, we drove a Hampton gentleman to the VA hospital in Manchester and then sent somebody over there to pick him up. We have sent people, volunteer drivers have taken folks to Portsmouth, Salisbury, Newburyport. If I can find a driver, that's where they go. In October, just to give you a sense of what the overall value is, a one-way ride by one of our local taxi companies, and they're very good companies. This is from downtown Hampton to Exeter Hospital, a very common destination, is $30 one way by the time you get done with your mileage fees and your pickup fees. In October, when we had 55 Hampton residents, we had 13 trips to Portsmouth, 14 to Exeter, 2 to Newburyport, 2 to Newington. November, we jumped up to 77 Hampton trips, and we had 22 to Portsmouth, 12 to Exeter, 3 to Salisbury. December, this is where the numbers get crazy. We jumped up to 92 trips for Hampton, 27 to Exeter, 2 to Manchester, 4 to Newburyport. It's filling a need. It's helping folks get where they need to go. It's helping seniors maintain a contact and connections with their community. And one other piece that you need to think about